Okay, so before explaining is option equal to value, you first have to understand filter options, and then it becomes very, very easy to understand is option equal to value. Okay, so look, we have original option 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's the drop down. Let's say, I don't know, let's just pretend that this is a gigantic object, and in there we also have names, which is Joe, Jane, Fu. So we want, when somebody selects Joe, it highlights 1. When somebody selects Jane, it highlights 2, and so forth. Okay? So right now, filter options, like I'm assuming you kind of understand how it works, because I have a separate video on how it works, or you can find it yourself, ask ChatGPT. But look, if we have 1, 2, 3. If we type Joe, okay, boom. The problem is it knows what Joe is, but it doesn't know which option does Joe belong to. So it doesn't know what to highlight. That's why you get this yellow warning. Okay? So to fix that, we do is equal to value equals. So now we have original options array, and then value selected by user. Oh, let me just console log these two real quick so you can see. Okay, so the first thing you need to understand is that this thing works like this. If it returns true, you do not get yellow warning, and it will highlight if you map correctly. If it returns false, you get yellow warning. Okay, so let me just demonstrate this real quick, super quick. If you return false for everything, you get yellow warnings. Doesn't matter what you pick, always yellow warnings. If you return true, you will have everything highlighted, but you don't get yellow warnings. But that's not the way to do it, okay? So I just wanted to kind of just fundamentally understand this principle. If it returns true, you get a highlight and no yellow warning. If it returns false, you get the yellow warning and no highlight. Okay? Alright, so now let's go with the understanding what do these two things mean. Original options array refers to this. Okay? So this thing, every time you click into the autocomplete, it will iterate through the whole array to see. It will just iterate through it, kind of like a for loop. Alright? Now, value selected by user is whatever the user has typed and clicked on submit. I'm talking about, like, okay, let's look at this thing. So let's select Joe. Oh, we need to return something. Let's just return true. Otherwise this thing is not gonna run. Okay, so as you can see, we selected Joe. Value selected by user is Joe. We can say value typed by user, value selected by user, like, as long as it makes sense in your head. Whatever user value inputted by user makes no difference, okay? So, and we have iteration through every single array. Now, it's going to run multiple times, as you can see. Now, don't ask me why it runs so many times. I mean, it just does that. I think it depends on how many options there. But bottom line, okay, right now, it doesn't know what to highlight. It just highlights everything because we're returning true and you get no yellow warnings. So, to fix that, we need to map it. So, let's do like this. So by default, well, let me just, I don't know, let's go back a step so you will understand what's happening, right? Let's just, so when we type Joe, it doesn't know which one does Joe belong to, okay? So we want Joe to be number 1. So how do we map it? We activate this thing, and then we say if original options array, well, value, original options array value, a bit more correct. Is equal to, so we want to map Joe to 1. So if it's equal to 1 and value selected by user, because that's what they type Joe, is equal to Joe, we want to return true. Okay? So now think about it this way. What does it do? In the drop down, now you have to return something, otherwise it's going to complain. Okay, so think about it this way. In the drop down, that's what appears when you click in the drop down. But now, because you have custom input, which is filter option, you selected Joe. Joe does not appear in here. So you need to tell it where does Joe belong. And you say, okay, if the user inputted Joe and one of these values is 1, return true. So what that tells that system is that, okay, if the user inputted Joe and I found 1, highlight it and do not display the yellow warning. It's confusing. I know, it's like I spent, this is 7th hour, probably 7th hour, I'm trying to just get the logic, how it works. But exercises like this are very good, because then when you're working your projects, you come up with some very old callback nonsense, stuff, legacy code. It becomes very easy for you to understand what the hell is going on. So you see, 1 is Joe. When we drop down, it highlights 1. Do you understand? So, now the question is, if I type Jane, and I select Jane, you see, boom, yellow warning. Why is it like that? Because we don't know where does Jane belong in the original drop-down. So now we have to map it. We have to map it again. Well, let's just, for the fun, map Jane to 3. Okay, so what's the condition? The condition is like this. If, well, we can do value selected by user first. If value selected by user equals to Jane and original options array value equals to, so if it finds 3, that's where we want Jane to be. Return true. It's honestly, this thing is very similar to TanStack filter function. Like very, very similar. If you understand how that works, you kind of get how this works as well. I just want to remove all the console logs. So look, if we type Jane now, no yellow warning. Why is that? Because we mapped it. You see? There it is. We probably want it to be 2, to be honest with you. So now we have final condition, which is full. Again, we don't know where does it belong. It doesn't know what to highlight. So we have Joe highlighted, right? It's number 1. We have Jane, which is number 2, right now, because we. Okay, so now we need to do foo, right? So again, it's very, very simple. If they select foo, and this thing is 3, highlight, right? So we select foo. There it is, and that's about it. The only caveat I'd say is that, okay, you see this function here, do not ever return custom values. Like so for example, let's say you say, okay, well, why don't you just do this? Joe, Jane, foo. Now you basically, you kind of mess this whole logic out, because now it's just going to, all of this became irrelevant. And this function also became irrelevant. So but you see, like, it just doesn't know what to highlight. This is because you see, like, there's just no highlighting happening. This is because these values do not exist in here. So even though inputs are the same, since this array does not exist in the drop down. Do you understand? So this drop down is not mapped to 1, because what your like, it's technically it is mapping, but visually you don't see it, because there's no 1, 2, 3 in here. But like, I made a video previous to this explaining this stuff, but I'm just saying that, you know, never do shit like this. Like, this is just very, very bad. You're just messing up the whole component when you do that. So if you want to have some kind of custom values, put them in here, but always return original options. Otherwise, you're just gonna honestly mess up the whole thing, you know? Like, the easiest way to do it, honestly, would be like this. If state input value, let's just put something like names. So now you will get the effect that you're looking for. So you type names. Whoops, yeah, I just need to reload 1 second. Okay, so if you type name, you get your names, right? So if we select Jane, it will be second, right? There it is. Now, the order doesn't matter. I'm just saying that the order doesn't matter here. You can put foo first, and then it's going to still map correctly, because we mapped it in here. Remember, this is the most important part. So let's say we type again, we type names, foo is going to be first. Now foo is mapped to 3, do you understand? I know this is confusing as hell. Honestly, I spent 7 hours on this, like, so it really does. You have to experiment with this thing. Very hard to explain it. Especially this, like, the process of this thing iterating through values and then seeking to see, like, you just have to practice. You just have to practice and sit for like hours and hours and hours, and then eventually, like, maths, you know, like, people say, oh, how do you become good at maths? Dude, you just practice every single day, 10,000 hours, and then you'll be super good. And this idea of, like, it's like how to become good at chess, practice there. And it's the same with programming. Programming is just standard cognitive complex task where you just practice, and then even if you're a monkey brain, you still figure it out eventually. there's a good professor. He said that, you know, if you train monkey for 30 years, you can practically do anything. So you don't really have to be a genius to do this stuff. It's just that you have to be willing to commit a lot of time to this. But bottom line, kind of, that's the explainer. Okay, take care, bye bye.